All right, we're back for example 2, proving corresponding parts are congruent. So what we're given is we have a proof. It looks like we're going to have a nice little fun flowchart proof here. Let's look at the format of this flowchart proof before we get started. So what I'm seeing is there's one part here, there's one part here, and it seems like this is, or sometimes I like just one step. And then this looks like it's something that leads to something else that leads in there. So this looks like a two-stepper, right? And look at all three of these are converging on this one thing right here. So I wonder what that's going to be, where we have three things converging to make a statement. Okay, so we would just want to look at the format of this before we get started so we know as we look at things, you know, what is a one-step piece of information? What is a two-step piece of information? What do I think these three things are that are converging together to make this grand statement? Okay, so let's get started. So it says given YW bisects XZ. So YW is here. It bisects XZ. What does that mean? Yes, it cuts it in half, which means that this XW is congruent to WZ. So we have the bisects, which then says those are congruent. So that kind of looks like it might be a two-stepper, right? There's this given information, and then from that given information, we can say that XW is congruent to WZ. Okay, so it looks like two steps. Then what do we have? It says XY is congruent to YZ. So those are congruent. Okay, so we have these two sides are congruent, we have these two sides are congruent, and that's it for the given information. Is there anything else you see? Right, what do we have? We have this triangle here, this triangle here. Oh, what's it asking? It wants us to prove that the angle XYW, so it wants us to prove that this angle right here is congruent to ZYW, is congruent to this right here. So this is what we have to prove. So far it gave us two sides. What else? What else is there? Do you guys see that this side is congruent to itself, right? Because of the reflexive property of congruence. So then what do we have? We have our three sides, right? This side is congruent, this side is just congruent to itself, right? So side, side, side. Therefore, we can say that these two triangles are congruent because of side. And then most likely, see this angle is between a 2 and a 3, and this angle is between a 2 and a 3, a side. See how the side is a 2 and that's a 3, and this is a 2 and a 3? That means that those two angles are congruent. So we can prove it by that. Once we prove that those two triangles are congruent, then we can prove those two angles are congruent because of CPCTC. So let's do it. Okay, so first, how about we do the two-stepper, right? So YW bisects XZ. So I'm going to write that right here. YW bisects XZ, right? That's, oh, and then we write the given part here. I haven't done a flowchart proof in a while. And because of that, we can say that segment XW is congruent to WZ. Because of definition of a bisector, right? If something bisector, it bisects something else, whether it's a segment or an angle, it always cuts it in half, so you have two equal parts. Okay, so we have that. Then what do we have? This given information, I'm going to just put that over here. XY is congruent to YZ, and that's just given. And then oh yeah, this one. WY is congruent to WY because of reflexive property of equality. And look at, this is a side, side, side. So those three pieces of information are coming together to prove that the two triangles are congruent. So we can say that triangle, now I want to make sure I write it correctly. So I'm going to start at Y, okay? And I'm going to go in the direction of the 2, right? So Y, X, and then W. So Y, X, W. So I started at y and it kind of went 2 to the 1, right? So here I'm going to start at y again because it's between the 2 and the 3, so we know that it's the same angle. Y, and it's going to go in the direction of the 2, so YZW. So now I know that I wrote this statement correctly. It's so important to write that statement correctly. Why? Because there's 6 pieces of information if you write it correctly. And it's always assumed that you do write it correctly and you can tell those 6 pieces of information, those 3 sets of corresponding sides and those 3 sets of corresponding angles. So make sure that you take the time to write this correctly, otherwise it will be wrong. And we can say that these 2 triangles are congruent because of side to side. Perfect. And then what do we have to prove? We have to prove that those 2 angles, right? XYW, this one, and ZYW are congruent. And it's between the sides 2, 3 and 2, 3. So we know that they're congruent. And if you look here, it's angle Y and angle Y. And they're the first one here and the first one here. So they are congruent because of CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So if you just remember PT and then you just put C at the start and the end and in the middle, you know, that's, you know, that will help you remember it. Okay, so that's it for example 2. Now we're going to go to check it out example 2. Okay, what does it say? What does it say? Right here. Check it out example 2. Okay, we got another flowchart proof, right? This should be fun. Now, I don't think this flowchart proof is written correctly. So we might have to make an adjustment on this. And you're going to have to make an adjustment on your paper, and I'm going to make an adjustment in a little bit, okay? Yeah, I am, but I'm not going to make it. I guess I could make it. I'll make it in a little bit, all right? This just isn't written correctly. Okay, so we have given PR, segment PR bisects angle QPS. Okay, so PR bisects QPS. That means that this angle here is congruent to that angle, right? So we're given this information, then from that information we can say that those 2 angles are congruent, right? That's a 2-stepper. And if you look here, there's no 2-stepper, so that's why this configuration is wrong. But it says PR bisects QPS and PR bisects QRS. So this angle over here, which would mean those 2 would be congruent and those 2 would be congruent. Okay, which is also another 2-stepper. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this line right here. I'm going to white this line out. Okay. And I'm going to write this given information here. So PR, line segment PR bisects angle QPS and angle QRS, and then because of that, I'm gonna make this arrow go here, and that's not usually the way flowchart proofs go, but we're just gonna make an adjustment for this one. So this, we know that PR bisects both of those angles, so we know that this first angle, QPR, angle QPR is congruent to, so QPR is congruent to RPS. RPS. Okay, that's that first one. And then the second one is that QRP is congruent to angle, okay, QRP is congruent to PRS. Right? And that is because of definition of an angle bisector. Okay, so that's really 2 pieces of information. And that's it for the given information. From there, they want us to say that PQ is congruent to PS. They want PQ, so they want this. They want PQ is congruent to PS, that side and that side. How are we going to do that? So we have these two angles, right? They're congruent, but remember, for the cheat rules, you need 3 pieces of information. Do you guys see anything? We got 2 triangles here. Do you see this side? Yes, it's reflexive property of equality. It's congruent to itself, right? So we're going to say, or congruence, reflexive property of congruence. That's what I should have said. So we're going to say PR is congruent to PR because of the reflexive property of congruence. Then do you know what we do? Think. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? If you're thinking angle, side, angle, and angle, side, angle, you would be right. We can say that these 2 triangles are congruent because of angle, side, angle, okay? And then because of that, then we can say that those 2 sides are congruent because of CPCTC. Well, if they're corresponding, we got to make sure they're corresponding first, okay? You always got to check that. Okay, so let's write these. We got to make sure that we write those 2 triangles being congruent. We got to write it down correctly. So I'm going to start here with P, and I'm going to go in the direction of this 1. So it's going to be triangle P, R, and PRQ is congruent, and I know P is the same as P, right? So I'm going to start with P, triangle P again, and I'm going to go right in the last, I went in the direction of the 1 side, so I'm going to go in the direction of the 1 side again, which would be PRS. And that is because of angle, side, angle. Now, we just need to see, are these corresponding parts? So here, PQ is the first and the third, and PS is also the first and the third. So we know that these 2 sides are corresponding parts of congruent triangles. So we can say segment PQ is congruent to segment PS because of CPCTC. And that's it for example 2. All right, I'll see you guys in a little bit to look for, oh, wait, I'm going to see you a little bit for example 3. All right, see you in a bit.